Hello everyone, welcome to a revision session on organizational behavior. I'm very happy to take you through the 10 sessions that we covered. Then we will zoom into what will be emphasized at the examination, which is upcoming. So we started off talking about organizational behavior, and these are the things that we covered, and we wanted you to comprehend the essence of OB and then to reflect on it and to apply in your daily life. And then if you look at the course outline, we had 10 sessions, and then there was instructions for self-assessment library, and I am sure you enjoyed going through the series of questionnaires in the self-assessment library. And we identified OB as HBO, that is basically human behavior in organizations. And we look at the typical definition of OB, a field of study that investigates three levels: individuals, interactive team, and the institution. Within those three layers, how they behave. And the contributing disciplines we identified: sociology, psychology, anthropology, and social psychology. And then those were defined very clearly, and you have these notes with you. And then we had the very first topic, knowledge in organizations, where we identified knowledge as understanding of something or someone. And then it is essentially information in action. Then look at what Peter Drucker had said. Knowledge is the resource that makes a society post-capitalist. And then we identified explicit knowledge, explanatory, tacit knowledge, exploratory, and we differentiated them by having a nice chart. What is tacit knowledge, which is subjective, what is explicit knowledge, which is objective. And then we looked at some interesting cases, types, forms and levels of knowledge at individual level, group level, organization level. We even went to the inter-organizational domain, the presence of explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. So please refresh your mind by going through the relevant notes. And the knowledge in action, knowledge work, we define knowledge worker, we define a person who does knowledge work. And then we had a very interesting knowledge conversion, we call it Secchi cycle, socialization, externalization, combination, and internalization, we call it Secchi spiral by Nonnek and Taguchi. And then that clearly gave us an idea how to convert tacit to tacit, tacit to explicit, explicit to explicit, and explicit to tacit. And we had a wonderful view of new business of paradigms, the video. And then that concluded the first session. Let me take you through the essence of the second session. And there we looked at personality, a detailed description on personality. Where we looked at personality as it originates from persona, which means a mask. And in Latin theatres, it is used to represent a character. Then we look at broader description, broader definition, individual differences in characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving according to American Psychologists Association. Then we look at determinants, heredity, environment, and situation, what you inherit from your parents, and what the surroundings and the critical incidences, the life-changing events in your career so far, in your life so far. And then we looked at Johari window, known to self, not known to self, known to others, not known to others, the variety of aspects in it. And then we identified you need to expand the open territory to other areas, particularly to understand the unknown territory, not to get blinded by what is not known to you, and not to have a facade to show a different face to the outside world, and so on. And then we had a quick check. We look at 9 different shapes, and then we define all different shapes. And then we did it as a fun activity, but it has a deep meaning because it gave us the inroad to MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator, where it was based on people's personality types. So we discovered that it's a personality type diagnostic instrument, and based on the work of Carl Gustav Jung and Catherine Briggs and Isabel Myers, they developed it as a commercial instrument. And then this is what Isabel Briggs Myers had to say. There are 4 dimensions: social orientation, either you are EOI, then information gathering, you are SOI, or intuitive SON, then information evaluation, TOF, and the reasoning approach, judging versus perceiving. And then we had a detailed questionnaire to assess our profile, and then based on that we identified certain preferences, certain descriptors. For example, if someone is to be extroverted, what are the features that the person demonstrates? If someone is introverted, what are the features we demonstrated? And we all discovered our MBTI type, 1 out of 16 different types. And then we looked at the combination, who you are versus what you do. And we look at an informal career guide, and we went into details and identified different variety of jobs that fit into a particular personality type. And I'm sure you'd have gone through this if you refer to the notes, and we have spent a lot of interesting time on this. And then we moved into the next personality assessment, which was Big Five. So if MBTI is more diagnostic, Big Five is more developmental. So one is more diagnostic, other one is more developmental. So this is a very simple CEAEO: conscientiousness, emotional stability, agreeableness, extraversion, and openness to experience. So this is what Lewis Goldberg and others did. So multiple acronyms, but we prefer CEAEO with obvious reasons, as we discuss in the class. And then these are the core traits on one side, and descriptive characteristics of high scores. You can say it's like causality. If you are high on conscientiousness, you demonstrate these. You can argue other way. If you show these characteristics, then you are high on conscientiousness. So similarly, you can go through the rest as well. Then we assessed our Big Five personality, and then again the final segment was type A and type B. Some are type A. You can see the difference and the indicators associated, and some are type B. You can see the definition and the indicator associated. And we discussed it's not becoming A or B, it's getting best of both worlds. So the final message was do what you are, not who you are versus what you do in separate compartments. Do what you are. Then you will have an enjoyable, exciting, excellent career. So that concluded with regard to relevant to us. And then we move to the third segment, which is very light but very meaningful. It is all about team dynamics. And we looked at the difference between teams and groups. So a group, we identified 2 or more individuals interacting and interdependent. They have come together to achieve particular objectives. So then we differentiated a team as a group with synergy, where their performance sum total is greater than individual inputs. So in simple definition, team we identified as a group with synergy. And then we had success through synergy, the sporting examples, plenty of examples to demonstrate success through synergy. And then we had a nice game, crash moon landing game, where we realized looking at salvage items, my ranking versus team ranking. Team ranking was closer to the NASA ranking. And then we had team development, stages in team development by Bruce Tuckman, forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And we went into each detail. Stage 1, forming, theme is awareness, what are things you need to do. Stage 2, storming, theme is conflict, what are the things you need to do. And stage 3, norming, theme cooperation, what are the things you need to do. Stage 4, performing, theme productivity, and what are the things you need to do. Stage 5, adjourning, theme separation, so what are the things you need to do. So in summary wise, forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, awareness, conflict, cooperation, productivity, and separation. And we looked at what stage are we in the team development. And if you get stuck in storming, it will be a decay. The real tipping point is from storming to norming, from going down and moving up in terms of your performance. And then we look at team effectiveness, and we identified 4 contributing factors: combination, how the task should match skills, composition, and context, and conduct. And look at team size. Smaller teams are fast at completing tasks, and larger teams are consistently better at problem solving. So increase in team size are inversely related to individual performance. This can be described as a diagram. Expected performance is dropped due to loafing. So you see, higher the team size, there will be a drop in performance because there will be freewheelers, there will be passengers, there will be people who are just there without performing. Tendency for individual to extend less effort. And then we looked at team roles. We spent a lot of time. Bell-pins team role, specialist, completer, finisher, team worker, monitor, evaluator, resource investigator, plant, shaper, coordinator, and implementer. 9 different roles we identified. Then we went into each of the detailed strengths and shortcomings. Implementer, coordinator, strength and shortcomings, shaper, strength and shortcomings, and then plant, strength and shortcomings, then resource investigator, strength and shortcomings, and then monitor evaluator, strength and shortcomings. Then we had team worker, strength and shortcomings. Then we had completer finisher, strength and shortcomings. Then we had specialist, strength and shortcomings. Then this is the summary. And then we also looked at 4 C's for team leaders. A team leader should have competency and curiosity, courageousness, and care. So 4 C's. You have to be competent, curious, courageous, and caring. And be aware, teams are not always the answer. You have to get solid answer to these 3 questions. Then only you have the team is needed. So it's your judgment call to decide. So team emotional intelligence. We looked at what Druskett and Wolf proposed. So if you look at the blue color terms, shared set of norms, emotional processes, trust, team identity, and team efficacy. So it's a norming. You need to have trust, team identity, and team efficacy. So we look at a case on a virtual team at TS terms, how they behaved unethically in not revealing their discovery to the top management. As such, they got extra time, but they did not disclose that, and finally they were exposed. And it's a classic case of a virtual team which is geographically separated but technologically connected. So that concluded our discussion, and we look at how the birds fly, and we say birds of a feather flock together. Okay, so we looked at that. And then we moved into something deeper, emotional intelligence. And we talked about emotional intelligence, and there we identified what is intelligent to understand and also the ability to learn, and evolution of awareness, 3 levels: rational, emotional, spiritual. Then we compared the 3. Then we identified emotional intelligence in various quotations, various ways, emotions, and we had the emotions are connected to sometimes the body, we call it, or the mind. Angry is to do with mental, hungry is to do with the body, either psychological or physiological, 2 sides. And then it's the E equals F plus T. We identified emotion equals feeling plus associated thoughts, and we got some examples in the classroom. So what Aristotle said, the need to have emotional maturity, and we had this wonderful diagram. Affect is the large domain where emotions are intense feelings, intense but short duration. Moods are less intense but long duration. The basic moods we identified. Then basic emotions, 6. Anger, fear, sadness, happiness, disgust, and surprise. So these are quotations about emotional intelligence. We looked at various ways how different emotional intelligence are there. It's not nothing new. It had been there from time immemorial, whereas these 2 are the co-formulators, John May and Peter Salovey, and Daniel Goleman popularized it through his publications. And then we look at Haka, one classic example of how it's in sporting world and in corporates, and we saw how Steve Ballmer running around, and we developed Haka for us, if you remember. We had a wonderful Haka, and the medical explanation about amygdala, the role of amygdala, where the deep emotions are stored. We look at it as a capacity, and we identified 5 key components: self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation, empathy, and social skills. We look at the way to assess your EI and EI model, self and others on one side, regulation and recognition on the other side. So you get self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship management, and positive impact on others. Then we saw EI competencies, 12 different AI competencies, and we picked and chosen the improvement areas, the EQ as a measure, and IQ versus EQ, the comparison, and the critical success factor is EQ. So IQ is the tip of the iceberg, the bulk is EQ, and IQ gets you hired in, EQ gets you fired up or out. That's a professional progress, and the theory supporting that, team emotional intelligence, we had a look at it, and that's essentially what we covered. So mindfulness, be aware, and this is what Vietnamese monk Thi Ngoc Hong said, feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky, conscious breathing is my anchor. So from emotional intelligence, we moved into the next one, which is motivation, which we had a very deep and broad discussion. Motivation, where we talked about motivation as which means to move, and then it's a process starting with the gap for a deficiency. Then three things: intensity, direction, and persistence towards attaining a goal. It's all about a goal-driven behavior. In a simple model, there are unfulfilled needs. We have some behavior to fulfill it, and rewards and the feedback. Say you are hungry, you go and buy something to eat, and then your hunger is gone, you are satisfied, and the need is no more. Motivation types: intrinsic and extrinsic, self-generated and generated by others. Examples we discuss, and approaches, content and process. Content talks about what aspect, process talks about how aspect. I will not go into details because we had a detailed discussion, and then we had Maslow's hierarchy, popular one, and then we had ERG theory by Alderfer, and then existence needs, related needs and growth needs. Then we had Herzberg's two-factor theory, hygiene and motivators. So hygiene factors, in the absence of them, huge demotivation; in the presence of them, neutral. In the case of motivation, in the absence of them, neutral; in the presence of them, motivators. So we identified what those are. And then they are not opposites but separate constructs. So that's the thing you need to keep in mind. Hygiene factors and motivators are not opposites but separate constructs. And then we look at acquired needs theory by David McClellan. So we look at NH, NPOW and NF, three different ones. So someone has inclination or a dominance, either need for achievement, need for power, and need for affiliation. Then we had a TAC, thematic perception test, how to identify the different needs. And then we shifted to the process theories, the how part of process, motivation. Then we looked at Stacey Adams' equity theory, famous one, where we look at inputs to a job and outcomes from a job, and comparison, me versus others, equity, my outcomes as compared to others, and two aspects: guilty, inequity, and anger, inequity, two sides, and motivated to restore equity, condition, person, reference. So these are further explained. Justice, there are three types of justice: distributive justice, procedural justice, and interactional justice. And then Victor Room's expectancy theory, the most complicated perhaps. We had effort, performance link, performance reward link, and rewards goal link. And I think we discussed extensively in the class. And Loke's goal setting theory, basic premise: difficult goals with self-generated feedback lead to higher performance. And the difficult goals and relationship. And finally, Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory. And you can go through the details. Higher efficacy means higher confidence and higher persistence, better response to negative feedback. So we saw this complementing goal setting theory. So given hard goal, increased confidence, higher performance, higher self-set goal. So you can see that very clearly. So this is one example where no one expected Sri Lanka to beat England, and England was on a well start, but then finally they lost the match. At least we can be happy that we beat the world champions. So we did this team activity: theory, category, key strength, key shortcoming, key current application. If you refresh yourself, that is more than enough. So that concluded our discussion on motivation, and we had next one, which is more detailed about values, attitudes, and job satisfaction. I will not go into too much of detail. values, attitudes and job satisfaction, where we talk about values and value system. And we looked at types of values, instrumental and terminal, and we defined both. Then we looked at examples for both. Then you look at different generations, a cohort of 20 years, perceived factors affecting, and 6 generations based on William Strauss and Neil Hoover, and what are those generations. And then a group entered workforce, current age, dominant work values, and so on and so forth. And then we summarize the work values: traditionalist security, liberal success, excess synergy, different values. And then millennials, we had a detailed look: common characteristics, optimistic, tech-savvy, multitasking, flexible, transparent, and eco-friendly, and also results-oriented. So what are the expectations? Go, grow, and glow. Then tech credit tribe is now part of the world. That's where I differ from some of the gurus, where they say millennials are same all over the world. They are same with technology, but they are different with regard to tradition. So we have tech credit tribe. So we looked at managing a multi-generational workforce, where you have different generations, and they are the challenges. We have to move from value to attitudes. Values provide basis for attitudes. Attitude we defined very clearly. You have to go through that definition. Then attitudes, evaluative statements, CAB of an attitude, cognitive, affective and behavioral, or simple terms, evaluating feeling and action. Then we took some examples: cognitive dissonance, disharmony between C, A and B. Then we looked at some more examples. Attitude toward job is reflected as job satisfaction. So 3 things: presence, productivity and progress. Then we look at employee responses: active, passive on one line, and destructive, constructive on the other line. And 4 things happen. You have to be thorough with this: job characteristics model, core dimensions, psychological states and outcomes. How this Hackman and Oldham model is beautifully done. So you need to be very good at these 3 things: core dimensions, psychological states and outcomes. So MPS, we did a calculation. MPS, motivational potential score. It's a predictive index that suggests the motivating potential in a job. So we did a sample activity, and we looked at a beautiful video: 5 qualities of confident, empowered people, self-appreciation, vision, purpose, commitment and contribution. So that concluded perhaps the deepest and the broadest discussion we had. Okay. And then we had the next, a few more to go. We had the next discussion: perceptions and decision making. Perceptions and decision making, where we looked at how perceptions have a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. And we look at the importance of a perception. The world as it's perceived is the world that is behaviorally important. And we look at factors that influence: perceiver, situation and target. So this model is extremely important. You have to be thorough with this model, and you have to find, like the way we did in the classroom, how to take a scenario and interpret based on these 3 different groups of factors, how a perception is created. And then attributing theory, judging others. This I would like you to read, but I will not test you on these areas, but they are important. And then internal versus external, we had detailed discussion, distinctiveness, consensus and consistency, elements and so on, errors and biases, fundamental attribution error, self-serving bias, and then the underestimate external factors, overestimate internal factors. In other words, we blame people first, not the situation. Whereas self-serving bias means it's our success but their failure. We take the credit for success but pass the buck for the failure to others. And decision, choice made between 2 managerial decision making, of Chinese word for crisis. These are very straightforward stuff. So we look at opportunities, threats, sense, size and seize, acknowledge, assess and address, types of decision: program, non-program. So program is automatic, non-program is the one we need to be real managers having the competency. Decision making, rational decision making, the perfect world, which we don't have the luxury. Whereas bounded rationality, we bound it. That's what we do, real world model. And the other one is intuition. So we need to have information based bounded rationality and intuition. So that's what we do. decision-making steps, recognize the decision, frame the problem, generate alternatives, choose alternatives and implement, choose an alternative and also learn from feedback. So we look at evaluating alternatives, practical, economical, legal and ethical. 4 things you need to ask. So problems we look at perceived discrepancy, a gap between ideal and actual. So one common experience of all humanity is to challenge or solve problems. So life is full of problem solving. So perception linkage, this is something important. All elements of problem identification and the decision making process are influenced by perceptions. And that concluded our discussion with a beautiful video on Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what we did in this section. Okay. And then we had another interesting exercise of a passing comment. And if you move on the power and influence, one before the last. So, power and influence, we identified power as capacity to control and other things. The basis of power, French understanding is extremely important. I would like you to go through coercive, reward, legitimate, expert and referent. The definitions are given. You need to be very thorough with the 5 bases of power and additional bases. Information power, persuasive power, charisma, and then 2 groups we can categorize. First 4 and the second 4, first 4 position related, second 4 person related. And the dependence has 3 sides. You depend on someone because of importance or scarcity or non-substitutability. No other way to do that. So power is the ability to influence. Influence is the process of affecting the thoughts, behaviors and feelings. Authority is the right to influence another person. Organizing politics, the ugly part, pursue the individual agenda, read the definition and why, how it affects, decrease job satisfaction, increase anxiety, increase turnover, reduce performance. And behavioral effects, 5, groupthink, Ash effect, Zimbardo effect, Milgram experiment and Genovese effect. Actually, Milgram experiment has 2 effects. So groupthink, you can go through the details and examples I have given, Pearl Harbor attack, Bay of Pigs invasion, and on one side cohesiveness, on the other side contradictory views. So you have to balance. Space shuttle disaster is a classic example where when managers dominated, engineers shut down and they were victims of groupthink. Ash effect by Dr. Solomon Ash, Reed and Lee Taro, and conformity, either informative conformity or normative conformity. You think others know better than you and then you bow down, or you know they are wrong but you don't want to have any upset. You want to maintain relationships, so it can happen either way. Zimbardo experiment, very interesting, very intriguing, and you need to be very thorough with it. And how good people end up becoming bad, the Lucifer effect. That is something very interesting. And the next one is Milgram experiment. Dr. Stanley Milgram, what he did. And at the Yale University, the experiment he conducted, a memory study, giving a mock shock. It is not a real shock, but a mock shock. But the other party, the teacher thought it was a real shock when there was a recorded screaming of the learner. And interesting, it showed the obedience and different variations, surveillance, 2 effects coming out, surveillance effect, and the same thing happens when you are under scrutiny, your obedience goes up. The buffer effect is when there is a buffer between you and the other party, your obedience drops. So the more direct interaction between the teacher and the learner, the learner became more obedient. So read that, it's very interesting. Final one is the Genovese effect. Kitty Genovese was murdered and then no one came into the rescue, unresponsive bystander effect. So in summary, you see these are the behavioral effects. Groupthink, Ash effect, Zimbardo effect, Milgram experiment, resulting in 2 effects, surveillance, buffer, and finally Genovese effect. So if you can do this, each effect, what it means and key workplace example, this is more than enough. I'll be testing one of those in the exam. And I would just conclude by having one more revision, which is stress, the final one, which is the easiest, I would say. Stress into success. Where in fact I have uploaded a video as well. So the difference between a piece of coal and a piece of diamond, and then reality around us change, and people go through an experience, that is where they get stress fight or flight, and then stress comes from stringy to draw tight. It can appear in various ways, positive and negative. Positive eustress, negative distress. Inverted U hypothesis, a zone of optimal performance. And what we need to do is to maintain at eustress and avoid distress to happen. And 4 stress types, you can go through it leisurely. General stress, cumulative stress, and then we have acute traumatic stress, then you have post-traumatic stress, so you can go through them leisurely. External stressors, internal stressors, there are both types affecting us, and stress symptoms, physical, mental, emotional. You can go through them very straightforward. And then assessing the stress level we did through a questionnaire. Managing stress, planned approach, emergent approach. The corporate athlete article is a beautiful one. You have to go through the article on corporate athlete, and then we look at building capacity, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, the peak performance pyramid, or ideal performance pyramid. You need to be active in all 4 fronts. So the golden gate is always positive, and obstacles should be viewed as opportunities. So that's essentially what we did, the beauty of stillness. Serenity of stillness, having the right stillness in action. Okay, I think that concludes the summary of what I had been talking. So I did not cover contemporary issues where you were given some articles to draw some mind maps. Okay, so this is what we discuss both physically and virtually. So now what will be the examination, the forward journey? Exam paper will consist of 2 parts. Part 1 will be a caselet, a brief case, a case about a little more than 1 page. So based on the case, there will be 4 questions. Each question will earn 10 marks. So 10 into 4, 40 marks. That is part 1. Part 2, you have a choice. 3 questions out of 5. Each question will have 2 aspects, A and B. A is more understanding oriented, B is more application oriented. So A earns you 10 marks, B earns you 10 marks, altogether 20 marks. 20 into 3, 60. 60 plus 40, 100. So what are the 5 probable possible areas? Among the 10 areas, let me zoom into it. You need to be very thorough with teams, team effectiveness in particular. You have to be very thorough. And then the factors creating a perception, you have to be very thorough. And out of the 6 effects, I'll be testing you on 1 effect. For example, Ash effect or Zimbardo effect or Genovese effect. You need to be thorough with one of those effects. So I will ask you a question on that. And then about the basis of power, the definitions and suitable examples, and in your job, how can you experience those bases of power? You have to be very thorough. And then you need to be conscious about the different types of values and then how are they applied, the examples of different types of values and so on. And also the stress, how stress can be managed, particularly how distress can be managed. That interesting article by Lowe and Schwartz, you should be aware of the essence of it, the peak performance pyramid and so on and so forth. So these are some of the possible, probable areas that we will be testing you on. So be sharp, be precise, be specific, and be thorough with the area and have the broad understanding and have the right, clear, relevant application. So I hope OB is for your life. It's a journey of discovery, self-discovery, and discovering your team, discovering your institution. So individual, interactive team, and institution. So that is human behavior in organizations. Good luck at the exam and more luck after the exam. Thank you.